Hi, this is Scott H. Silverman. You're watching Break It Down Show.
It's right, the Break It Down Show coming straight at you live on a Monday morning. And I thought we would have Scott come on. We've got a common friend in Steve Ainsworth, and as always, a shout out to Steve for setting us up. You and I have a common passion to try to help people that have addiction. There's also in my world a lot of veterans that have that, and you're in San Diego, an area that has a lot, probably the largest veteran community on the West Coast, if not the whole nation. But I guess give us a little bit of your journey, and I'll put links up to your stuff as we're going along here so everybody can go look up what you do on the coaching side, on the addiction side, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. And I've been told that we have the fourth largest veteran population per capita in the country. I always thought it was number 2 or 3, but it's actually the fourth. And I don't know, I guess DC's probably ahead of us, maybe LA as well. So it's really nice to be here with you, Pete. And we probably do. We could be actually brothers from different mothers. I don't know that yet, but I have a sense, and we'll find more out about it. Anyway, I grew up here in San Diego, and still here in San Diego. I love it here. My wife and I have been together, coming up on 40 years. And next week, I'm going to be celebrating 38 years of continuous sobriety. And I share that publicly because I want people to know there is hope and help. And if a knucklehead like me can do it, then just about anybody who wants to can. It's possible. It can be done. I had my own journey, crashed and burned, got clean and sober in 84. Through the traditional means, got involved with volunteer work, and I've been involved with service to others since then. So I think I've gotten pretty good at it. I've learned what not to do anyway. And currently I run Confidential Recovery, which is an outpatient program. We work very closely with the VA here in San Diego, and we work mostly with veterans right now. And it's very exciting. And it's an outpatient program. That means simply, those who don't know, it's you come in for a few hours a day, 3 days a week, and you get to go about your job. And I've found over the years that working with professionals and first responders and with veterans, having that opportunity, if someone is a good fit for us and we are for them, it's a great way to really not only learn the tools you need to keep and stay sober and work in recovery, but also deal with a lot of the underlying issues, as we all know, that come up once you remove, I call the anesthesia. I'm also a crisis coach. I'm an interventionist, a family navigator. And recently I wrote my second book. It's called The Opioid Epidemic. So I'm fully immersed in the people helping people business. And I have my own, my own podcast. It's called Happy Hour. I did that to kind of annoy a few people that owe me money. And I enjoy also talking to folks as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to have conversations, because the only way we're going to reduce the stigma, in my opinion, is we're going to have these kind of conversations. So Pete, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Man, I appreciate all those things that you said. And, you've walked the walk, and maybe we are brothers from a different mother. One of the things that I know is that addiction is just, look, as much as we know about it, we still are trying to catch up to understanding it as a society. There's some people that are leading the way in other ways on it. But, it used to be that 9 out of 10 people that went to rehab failed, right? And we've gotten better than that number, but it's still probably more likely than not in your lifetime that if you get really fully into addiction, it's going to be really tough to get out of it. The other side of that is if you talk to someone, they still have that belief that if you want it bad enough, if you loved me enough, if you loved your family enough, you would make different decisions. But no one's choosing this thing, right? And so there is some self-accountability, but we on the outside who aren't addicted to things have to understand what that battle is. So I guess let's start with, have we gotten better? And then what is that battle?
It's interesting because we actually haven't. The science shows that, to your point, here's a quick snapshot. The average person who goes through a 28-day inpatient program, no matter what their economic level, no matter how much they want to spend for treatment, no matter where they go in the world, if they do nothing after that 28-day period, they have a 95% chance of relapsing. 95%. And that data, I got to tell you, Pete, it's fascinating. But at the end of the day, according to all the science, that really hasn't changed. And it doesn't matter if you go to a high-end facility where they massage your toes every 10 minutes and they feed you through tubes, or they give you the greatest food in the world, and you sing songs and you play with drums and guitars and music therapy. It's what you do after, because once you remove the anesthesia, that's when the work starts. That's the underlying issue, the untreated trauma, the PTS. So at the end of the day, are we getting better at trying to identify things? I think so. Is there hope and help? Absolutely. Is there more hope and help than ever before? Yes. Is the education level rising? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I don't think we're seeing more people get into treatment and do a better job yet. And I think part of the reason is the stigma. And let me talk about real quick, the disease of addiction. And here's my analogy that I love the most. If you and I were talking about diabetes, which is a disease, it would be a whole different conversation. And you know what? Nobody wakes up at age 9 months and says, "Hey, mom, dad, could I get an addiction, please?" People are born with it, unfortunately. And, my mind is wired that way. And I didn't get a choice. What I did was I sought help when I hit my bottom, trying to take my own life. And I listened and I took it on. And I've been fortunate to, have 38 years of continuous sobriety on the 7th of November. But I also know that this disease is a disease of denial, the inability to feel feelings. And most people don't want to raise their hand and go, "Hey, I need help." And that's still part of the problem. And that's the stigma piece. So, I don't want to knock it down, but I got to tell you, if we were getting better, we'd see better results. And I don't blame anybody for it. And when families call me as a crisis coach, I get it all the time. My answer is, look, it's not your fault. It is a disease. Let's get the highest, best information we can to you and the family. And let's see if we can get your loved one to the highest and best level of care that we possibly can. And then one size doesn't fit all. And there's different ways to get into getting support and help.
Yeah, and when you liken it, I like that you did that, because I do a similar thing. When you liken it to a disease that we know about, like ALS is a very individualized disease, and it's nasty. It is like addiction. Like your addiction is going to be different than my addiction, and how we deal with it. Another thing that we lose sight of is that addiction is often a contributing factor in someone's ill health. So like my brother passed away about a year ago. He took his own life. Part of his problem was he had addiction. He also had a little piece of bone broken off on his ankle in the Marines that they prescribed an addiction. And so you have all these things, and then at some point your mental health, your well-being reaches a tipping point where you have so many things going against you. And I'm not even including like the perceptions of shame that you have for yourself, the feelings of like, I'm letting my family, all of these things that just pull and eat away at your well-being. It is absolutely a disease. And you wouldn't denigrate someone who has stage 4 cancer and they're fighting and it's ugly and they're not well. And they go, because when you get chemotherapy, radiation therapy, you often aren't mentally right because your brain is being starved of the things that it needs to keep you healthy. And we have some grace for those folks. So you're right. There is an education that we all need to understand. It does not make it pleasant. And addiction is, and I know you'll echo this, addiction is one of those things where the tumor, whatever the tumor is, manifests in the family. And you're just like, I can't take it anymore. I've got to get away from you. Even though I love you and I want you to be well, I can't help you. I've got to get away from you because you're killing me.
Right. And what happens with those behaviors is they usually don't get better on their own. And when someone's self-medicating, they're not a lot of fun to be around. It's interesting. 15% of this country has an addiction issue that will erupt in the next 12 months. And what's fascinating with the data that around the studies is each person who's impaired, whether they're under the influence on a Tuesday and they're impaired on Wednesday from being, let's say, hungover, to use an example, they will negatively impact 7 people that day. So when you think about it, if 15% are impaired, and they will negatively impact 7 people. That's 85% of our country right now when you do the math around that. It's interesting, switching over to veterans, 80%, and this was just shared with me 6 months ago, of veterans who take their own life have not sought help. 80%.
Yeah.
And they have that data because they're in the system. So that's an outcome of information that really needs to be addressed, which is why I've chosen the path of supporting veterans. And this month, and I'll announce it here, starting in November, we're opening up our nonprofit we've worked on for a year. And it's called the Veterans Navigation Center. It's going to be based here in San Diego. And the goal is when a veteran needs help, they're going to call us, hopefully, or a family member, and we're going to help get them pointed in the right direction. And then if they need treatment, we'll be part of that arm of support. And we're working with 160 other nonprofits. They don't know it yet, but we'll tell them in the next couple of weeks because sharing is caring. And there's a lot of resources out there. But there's, according to what we're hearing, there's not a big coordinated effort. And if you don't go to the VA, which a lot of veterans don't want to, don't know how to, or just can't navigate the system, we're going to help hold their hand and kind of be like a concierge service. So it's really exciting. We've been working with veterans now going on 4 years, working with first responders for 10, and 30% of first responders are veterans. So it's really organic. We're very excited about it. And we're going to be training what's called lived experience or experienced lives of veterans that have graduated our treatment program. And we're going to make them the concierge because they speak the language, they get it, they understand, and they know the difficulty when it comes to navigating, getting help as a veteran.
I just have to echo what you're saying there because we are stubborn and don't want to go to the VA. We feel like we're too tough and we're supposed to be and everything else, and I'm not that bad off, right? And then you have the folks that hear about how horrible the VA is. And in their defense, the VA is often horrible. Like right now, I can't get care for my back until I go back and reattack. So tomorrow when I go see my doctor, you better believe I'm going to be on it. I'm going to be hollering at him, but it's taken months to get to this point, right? So there is, the VA has earned that, right? And there's a lot of great people at the VA, but it is a massive organization. And then also, because it's a massive organization, it is impossible to navigate. You try and you try and you try, and you're just like, oh my God, and you have to have an advocate to help you advocate for your own health. And that seems ridiculous, but it is that hard. And so I would say, like, anybody who's interested in, like, how do I help my loved one who's a veteran, just keep trying. Just find a way. And maybe like my charity that I work with, to Save the Brave, we use fishing primarily, right? That's our home thing. We have other things we do, but there's surfing, there's adventure sailing, there's easy sailing. There's a zillion of them. And it's great that you're trying to become a depot for that, because getting my next person in line who's like, hey, I'm struggling in the door there to help them. We need to be able to get them to where they need to go. And a lot of times what you just need is someone who cares, and then you're competent enough to help yourself, but you just don't know where to start.
And having that kind of support is like, having someone in the passenger seat with you. Look, there's lots of organizations that are difficult to navigate. The DMV, just the DMV, getting your license renewed. If you can't do it online, my God, if you've got to go wait, in line to do something like that, it's complicated. And, the VA is the second largest funded federal line item in the country. Yeah. And, the negative news that comes out, it's been out for a long time. We here in San Diego, we have a great relationship, but we're on we're working with the SUD side, the substance use disorder side. And they're separate from the behavioral health side. And then of course, any major medical issue is a whole different division. So we're going to become, we hope we'll become the VA's best friend, and we'll get some good cause marketing going. And when we've got vets who, we've got 5 out of about 20 that have volunteered to want to be trained, we're going to bring in some expert trainers to, how to answer the phone, how to have the patience and the tolerance, how to listen. Because, if you're not listening well, it's hard to hear it. And after a couple of months of listening to people piss and moan, it can get very frustrating. And you wonder, why haven't they got off their couch and just gone down to the VA? Well, if it was that easy, I wouldn't be in this business. People would be getting the kind of care they needed. They would practice self-care and they'd be okay. But, we're in a world where, we all need help sometimes. And 3 of the hardest words in the English language are, I need help.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's confounded by, I can do it. It's like,
well, man, and not only that, you as veterans, and thank you for your service, you've been trained to not ask for help. You're supposed to be self-sufficient. When I worked with first responders, and still do, and I hear somebody say, I'd rather eat my gun than ask for help.
Yeah.
that touches my heart. It scares me. And those are the kind of things that keep me motivated. Because you know what? People who have worked so hard to get trained and to be of service and save others, and they have some of the toughest time to help themselves. And, when you're working to help others and you have to kind of, suck it up and internalize it. I like the saying, pressure busts pipes. And who are you going to talk to? It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, I'm lucky. I go to 4 meetings a week, and some days they don't like me, because I say what I'm going to say. But you know what? It's a safe place to say it. Although I did get my covers pulled last week and pissed a guy off, and now he wants me to come help him with something. So but we got a chance, because we know we're there to help each other, that we can talk to each other. And it doesn't matter how much sobriety you have. I mean, it's just a matter of being willing to be part of something. And I'm glad I have it. I don't think I'd be alive today if I didn't have this social network with my people in recovery. No way I'd be alive today.
I've managed to stay alive partly because I've had a powerful network and things that make me useful to other people, right? Right. And I don't want to stay on veterans the whole time, but since we're on this part of the conversation, let's keep going. Part of that thing, like one of the things I'll say, I've got a lot of combat time outside the wire, right? So not even just like the time on inside the camps, but outside. And me and a lot of my friends will say, I would rather be in combat than to go through this shit right now. And this shit it's just life. It's life, right? And you're just like, why is this so hard? And I'm being shot at a bunch. The other thing is when people try to help, like I put things into perspective as I've been in gunfights. I was hit by an army tank, hit my vehicle and damn near killed me in the vehicle behind us, right? And so you get a different level of like what scary is and what danger is, right? And that's not always a healthy way to see things. So when we look at veterans and the specific voices they need, and then all of a sudden we realizing that like people who work in ambulances, people who are firefighters, cops on a beat, cops on like, plainclothes details, these folks absorb a lot of damage that you don't see. And how do you deal with it? Well, you certainly don't tell anybody. I had a doctor tell me, and rightfully so. I was a spy, right? And I would go out every day, and my hips were just getting wrecked from all of the mud and the rocks I had to walk through, and the shit I had to. Because we were a small team, it's like, hey, this super heavy box has to get carried from here to a mile away. Well, Pete puts it on his shoulder, and he walks through the mud and slips and slides, and so my hips were aching. And I said, hey, man, my hips are aching. He's like, you have to shut up. If I do anything with you, they're going to take you and put you back at the flagpole, and you won't be able to do anything. You should enjoy the time you have and go do your job. And I'm like, got it. I don't want to be near the flagpole, right? And so you get this advice that goes to your point, like, I can do this myself. I can out-tough this thing. But in reality, over time, a lot of us, and you don't know going in if you're going to be the one that needs help. But if you do, man, oh, man, your world is going to change. And if they don't find someone like you or someone, who breaks through with them at AA, NA, wherever they're at, they're in a lot of trouble.
No, I absolutely agree. And it's funny. One of the most precarious roles right now of people who are, suffering some major harm are mental health providers. I mean, they're dealing with things, and with the pandemic, that physical communication with clients went away. It became virtual, just like this. And we actually had 4 psychiatrists 2 years ago. 1 year, 2 years ago, in that 1 year, took their own life. Their whole modus operandi changed. There was no flagpole to go back to because they had no place to go. They basically went to a place where they couldn't get any level of support and comfort. And now the wait list to see those experts, it can take up to a year, and it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to get the resources we need as a community and move forward. So, one of the things that I do as a crisis coach is I look at the whole spectrum. And to me, everybody who has a problem has a family member who's suffering along with them, especially with PTS. I mean, if you're untreated, everybody that cares about you and you care about that you're close to, more than likely, it's like the measles. It jumps over to them and it doesn't go away until it gets treated. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world today. And look at the kids who couldn't go to school because of COVID, what's happened to them? I mean, they've launched onto the internet now that, there's an internet addiction's greater than it's ever been. And, the fentanyl crisis, I mean, there's lots to discuss, and I'll go wherever you want today, but I just, want people to know there is hope and help. And I'm going to give my number, if you don't mind, 619-993-2738. 619-993-2738. And I've got my finger up, like your parent when they're saying, but I'm saying, call me. Let's talk. Yeah. Text me. If you've got a situation going on, I don't care where you are in the world, as long as you're not in the mud, carrying a big box like Pete was, but you've got you got a minute to sit down and talk, reach out. Let's talk about it. There is hope and help. And there's ways in your community to navigate that. But sometimes doing it alone is really hard. And doing life alone is really hard, especially today when everything's getting politicized and we've got legislative leaders swinging us this way, taking us that way, and you don't know sometimes which way is up. But that's okay. We'll figure it out together.
Yeah, we will figure it out together. I'm going to put the link up for Scott's book here. Let me see here. Where's it at? It is right down over here. Oh, I'm going to put it back up again. I know. It's over here in the comments. Dude, I'm doing too many things at once here. Okay, so get Scott's book, and it's the opioid epidemic. The thing about a lot of this drug stuff is our policies are chaotic, right? And I'm trying to stay apolitical here. But I had a guy who ran drugs on the show, and he's like, doesn't really matter what U.S. does. There's a demand, and we're a business, and we're going to fulfill that demand. So whether it's permissive or non-permissive, we're pushing this stuff through. And then there's also the punitive part where, like, Mexico and China are working. This is the smuggler talking. Mexico and China work in collaboration to push fentanyl through. And for a lot of Mexicans, it's like, well, screw America. Look at what they've got. Look at what they're doing. They're heathens. They don't fear God. So let them have all this fentanyl. And so there's all these things that allow access to. I mean, how many people has fentanyl killed in the last 5 years? It's just outrageous, Prince
it was 107,000 just last year, and that's probably twice of what it was from 3 years ago. And you know what, we don't always know that we're getting the best data, because according to the CDC, the opioid count, the morbidity count, is 12 to 18 months behind being confirmed and consolidated, and data being and most of it's driven right now from the medical examiners. So we know it's pretty close to being accurate, but that's assuming every medical examiner is turning the information in a timely manner. The data is 12 to 18 months behind right now. So, and then the ripple effect from that. Right now, it's about 400 a day in our country, just because and behind opioids. And half of that's probably fentanyl, accidental overdoses taking place right now. Then you add alcohol, methamphetamine, and suicide on top of that. We're probably close to 800 to 900 people a day we're losing this country every day. It's more than COVID now. And we don't even talk about it like the weather. So until we make it a priority as a country, and you're right, you're absolutely right. I like to meet this smuggler one day, because I used to be, I'm a retired unlicensed pharmacist. So I get the market distribution side of it. But, back in the 70s, it was different than today. And, everybody asks the question, what are we going to do about this? Well, look, if China and Mexico are meeting now and they're talking about market share, we're the consumer, the United States. There's not going to slow that down. It doesn't matter. People say, well, it's coming to the border. It's coming to the border. It's coming through airplanes. Look at that big bust in Los Angeles, last week, where some guy brought in 12,000 fentanyl pills, and he put them in candy boxes to disguise them. And, you could make this stuff in your garage. I just saw a video today that was sent to me about pill machines that you can buy and, you get capsules on Amazon, and you can produce your own, fake looking Xanax or fake looking Adderall or fake looking, aspirin. And, we've got fentanyl coming out now. It looks like Skittles. So anything can be done. And, and you saw, then I'll close with this on that. Those 3 people in New York just a week ago who had cocaine delivered to their homes, unrelated to each other, but it was the same distributor, and they all died of a fentanyl overdose. Yep. They all died of a fentanyl overdose. And just yesterday, I got a phone call from a friend of a friend who said 3 of their healthcare buddies, their nurses and LVNs in New York, bought some of the same cocaine. Okay, this is a week after those deaths, but because they're healthcare providers, they got a hold of fentanyl test strips and they tested it. And clearly they found there was fentanyl, so they didn't take it, but they ordered from another supplier. So how can you be smart enough to test your product that you got, but yet you go to find some other? And so you have to keep testing. And that's a scary thing if you think about it. If you're going to do drugs like that, and 80% of the illicit drugs in California right now are showing up with fentanyl laced in it. So that's what we're up against. So folks, be careful what you've heard it your whole life. Be careful what you put in your body, but more now than ever, because it's poison.
Yeah, and that like the smuggling of fentanyl, it is a very dangerous substance, right? And so if you're just a mule and you're like, I bring boxes from A to B, okay, fine, maybe you're fine, but that stuff in any way up in the air, vaporized, whatever, dust, it is lethal. It doesn't take much at all to just to
2 milligrams, I believe it is. If you take a look at there's a picture out, and if you go on the web of a copper penny, obviously, and there's 2 little tiny dots, you can barely see them. That's how small a dose it takes to kill somebody. So, and it's synthetic, and it's not even a drug. It's a poison. It really is a poison. That's what people are taking today, because it's pretty rare you hear people say they're addicted to fentanyl. It's other parts like OxyContin and other things they get a hold of, or heroin, other opioids. Pretty rare, but it happens. But anybody who's using street fentanyl, the science says you're going to die. You're not going to get better. You're not going to get higher. You're going to die. You're going to overdose because it's bad poison.
Yeah. And watching somebody who is on fentanyl, I think in my friend circle, we had someone who maybe was exposed to that stuff, and they were completely irrational. And only because the police didn't choose to do anything heavy to this person did they dance away from that incident. Their life was in somebody else's hands. Their legal well-being was in somebody else's hands because they were out of their mind temporarily, and that wasn't their intention to take fentanyl. It was just present. And so you imagine if there had been any more, it could have been lethal. It could have been life-altering in terms of the penal system. It's a real tragedy.
18 to 45-year-olds right now, the number one killer in this country of 18 to 45-year-olds is opioids. Think about that for a second. That is scary. That didn't exist 5 years ago either. So it is ratcheting itself up. Imagine going on a long trip in a motorhome with me, what my conversations would be like. So what else can I tell you, Pete, that might be fun and uplifting? Oh, it's Halloween. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
I've been doing interviews all week about the people, putting fentanyl in candy for kids. And they go, is it true? I go, I don't think anyone would do that. Kids aren't good consumers. They don't have disposable income. And, it's not the place for it. Yeah, it looks like candy, but it's not going to be around for Halloween. And there'll be some knucklehead out there that might try. But, and that's been the conversation that this last week I've been talking to the media about is it true? I go, what true? No one's got a plan for that. It's just there's rumors out there that people are, be diligent. You're a parent. Just
right.
You were doing it last year. This wasn't even part of the conversation. Check your kids' candy when they bring it home.
Yeah. That's one of those things. We're like, well, we're going to make homemade treats. Homemade treats are the first things that go in the trash. Like, no thanks, Tom Hanks. We're not doing homemade treats around here. I want something with some controls on it. Yeah, and it's funny these boogeymen that we latch onto, right? Like, okay, is someone going to do that and kill some people? Okay, sure, probably some guy. It's a country of 330 million people. But the reality is that we are losing numbers that are equal to what we were losing our minds over with COVID, and outraged at all of this death. But when it comes to opioids and fentanyl, and then the things that come with that, the other addiction problems, suicide, all that, can't be bothered.
Well, alcohol is legal, so it really can't really be a problem. And, now in vaping, of course, and now with legalization of marijuana, pretty much it sounds like it's going to hit the whole country, and I look, I'm the kind of guy, you want to party, you should party. Yeah. There's no, I know that for a fact, and I hear it in my own meetings, marijuana's level of THC is higher than it's ever been. So that's another problem. So you don't really know what you're actually taking, and your body won't tell you until you've had too much until it's too late. So, there's no way to measure what that looks like. And the legalization is just making it it gives young people an excuse, it sounds like, to say, well, marijuana is legal, Well, alcohol has always been legal, but impaired drivers that kill people, it's not a good thing. So, we need better tools to cope, is what I'm thinking.
I don't really do marijuana. I live in California, so if I want to, I can. It's recreational and legal here. But I don't know how to do it, right? And then you're getting it from, a store, maybe it's a known, but you really don't know shit about what you're buying. It doesn't have a label on it that's held to a national standard. And so I'll smoke a little and I'm coughing and I'm like, God, why am I doing this thing that clearly my body doesn't want in it? And then I'm like, whoa, how did I get so stoned? I can't even operate anything, because I'm just trying to be like buzzed, right? And so I just don't do it, and then my friends will say, oh, well, you can vape. And I'm like, that's just another portal in that's going to cause problems internally. Like, we're learning more and more about that all the time. And so I can't find a way to consume it reliably and get like the same, like I'll drink Coors Light because I know that ride. And then that's fine. And I don't drink that much beer anymore, but back in the olden times I did. And so you have these things where you have access to it, not necessarily the greatest thing.
Well, as your crisis coach, Pete, let me suggest that you investigate edibles.
Yeah. And I've done edibles.
That way you don't have to smoke anything or do anything to the carbon footprint, and you don't have to inhale any heat. But, look, I know people that are taking the edibles, and, they were taking some pretty strong sleeping medication, and it's really helped them. And marijuana, when they talked about medical marijuana, it is a great tool when it's, prescribed in the right environment and you're dosing the right way and you're working with a doctor or medical professional who understands it. It's a great tool. It certainly beats some of the alternatives. And if you're getting it through some sort of a retail environment, they are required to oversee it. They're monitored, if you will, by, licensures and probably the DEA. And it can be a great tool. And I got to tell you, if someone says to me, should I, smoke heroin or put methamphetamine in my vape or marijuana, if someone's pushing me to give them a choice, I would say you pick the one that isn't probably going to kill you, which is generally speaking marijuana. But, some people call it a gateway drug. Some people don't. But, for someone who's suffering from pain and now they can't get Oxycontin, which, by the way, whenever I do a live show, I always get somebody calling me upset that someone took away their pain medication. And I get it. I mean, if that was helping them, sleep, eat, move, not move, and now it's gone and they're being forced out. That's why we're seeing this increase with heroin consumption, is people are replacing it with, with street drugs. And that's a shame.
It is a shame. Yeah. I think one of the contributing factors to my brother's demise was this change in opioid policy. And you prescribed an addiction, and then you take that away. Oh, and by the way, the pain in the ankle is still there that you needed the pill for in the first. And so it is a damning thing to try to, again, this is not political. It's a hard policy to manage so that you're reducing harm, but accepting that there's going to be loss of life no matter what you do at the national level.
And we knew it was coming. The AMA knew it was coming. Big Pharma knew it was coming. The DEA knew it was coming. The CDC knew it was coming. DOJ knew it was coming. And nobody was working on putting together a replacement for people who actually, I don't know what percentage, but I do know that, 3 years ago, 270 million prescriptions were written for Oxycontin, 270 million in 1 year. So, that's a lot. And how much of that was legitimate or not, I'm not sure really matters. But the point is, to your point, you have a family member who's on it and unfortunately addicted to it. And the science shows that over long periods of time, Oxycontin didn't really help pain. It made it worse in the brain, which is where a lot of pain comes from. But, you're physically hurting. Nobody wants to sit there. When I see these pain doctors at conferences, they're like, I'd ask, well, what's the alternative? And they go, well, yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what? Yoga. And I think these two doctors that were presenting, they were both prescribing for each other, because you could see them winking at each other when they're making this presentation, like, drinking a lot of water. And, I talked to them later and their eyes are all glazed up. And they're like, yeah, yoga. So how's it working for you? Oh, I don't like yoga. I have a bad back. Oh, okay. That's the alternative. Get off of Oxycontin and start working on yoga. I mean, that didn't make any sense. So
Yeah, well, and then this goes back to the policy side of things. The next time that they make a short-sighted policy, with no like, okay, you have attacked this one element of a larger problem, and you've managed to exacerbate that problem. So good job. And it's why being in the government is so damn hard, because even if you have great intention, the organization just isn't smart enough to handle these impossible problems. So we do have to grassroots this thing, it sounds like.
Well, it's going to be, one person helping another person, because if we're going to rely on the government, I mean, when I hear people's, look, I was a homeless provider for 18 years, and I've watched that fiasco go absolutely insane. And when I hear legislative leaders go, we need to do more.
Yeah. Okay.
Comma. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about that? I mean, we're not even talking about the opioid crisis. I mean, and I don't know how many guys are like me out there screaming and yelling. And I just got off a Zoom call with the group, and they go, tell us how you really feel. I said, I feel like I need to get a bigger megaphone. I feel like I need to be, and I can't get through to people. I can't get through to my mayor. I can't get through to the mayor of San Francisco. And they both claim public health crises around opioids in the last couple of months, but they won't take my phone call. And I said, you'll love this, Pete. Hopefully, I sent my book to every governor in the country last June. The book came out in May. I got 5 thank you notes. 5, and I got one of them sent back from the governor of Philadelphia, saying we don't take gifts.
Yeah. Well,
that was it. No follow-ups, no phone conversations, and I'm trying to get through our attorney general now, because they just said they're going to earmark 14 million, state of California, and we have 40 million people here. And I think 5,400, I think, OD'd last year in California alone. That was their number. And they won't even. So I get a nice email back from somebody saying, please refer to our procurement page. And I go, I'm not looking for a friggin' job. I'm looking to help save lives. Can I get someone to call me?
No, you can't. You can get a hold of your representative too. And it's
so to your point, it's going to be grassroots. It's going to be people like you that have a platform talking to people like me who want to help. And there's a lot of people out there that want to help, but they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the resources. They can't advertise. So you have to do your due diligence. You got to get online. You got to reach out. You got to educate yourself, and you've got to get motivated. I mean, at the end of the day, I remember years ago in my book, when I started researching, I started referring to the opioid overdose rate to a plane crash, a plane full of passengers. And people said, no, that can't be. I mean, if that were happening, which it is, imagine that we had a plane crash every day for a week. Okay. Yeah. Do you think the FAA wouldn't ground every single airplane? Every single pilot would be, tested, the flight crew, the airline, CEOs and the management, and go, what's going on? We're not putting you back in the air with passengers until we find out what's going on. We don't do that when it comes to opioids. We don't do that with alcohol, unfortunately. And methamphetamine is stronger and cheaper than it's ever been.
Is it fair to say that if those planes kept crashing, the FAA or the NTSB or whoever's going to be, wouldn't they at some point throw up their hands and go, "Hey, we're overwhelmed here. We can't investigate all these crashes"? I mean, is this a manageable thing, or is it just? I mean, how in the world do we get in front of that?
Well, not right now. We don't have the tools for it. I mean, I've been listening to people, when they talk about the borders, and because I usually go to JFK when they do an interview and say, of all the packages coming in, from around the world, what percentage do you actually get a chance to inspect? Yeah. And they say, we can't check them all. I give an example. San Diego has the busiest land border in the world. Okay. I just did a story on this a couple of months ago. 70,000 cars come through every day. 15% are commercial, the rest are private. Less than 1% of those vehicles are inspected. Yeah. That gives you an example. And people talk about the border. So, and they say if they were to take that 1% and jump it to 3% or 4% or 5%, the border would become a parking lot.
Not only would it become a parking lot, the expense is exponential, right? So now you need more agents, and as soon as you have more agents that have blown out knees and translators, and it becomes this $billion thing to do what? To not get it? Is this coming through? I mean, odds are if I drive from Mexico, and you know, I love going out of Mexico. If I drive back and I got something illicit in my car, no one's even going to look at me. They're just going to, hey, Pete, hey, how's it going? And I'm going to drive right through, right? I mean, that's just the odds are. You don't do it because you don't want to risk your freedom. But if you're making good money doing it, and you have any kind of method, oh my gosh, you could do it indefinitely. I mean,
that's why we're seeing so much product right now, because the manufacturers, you know, they'll put 100 people out there, even if they have to you know, rent the cars or buy the cars. The risk factor is so low of getting caught. And, you know, we're seeing major seizures now all across the country. So clearly, in my opinion, law enforcement has really raised the game. But the science is that 10% of illicit drugs, we'll just use that for example, are caught on an annualized basis. Now, if 10% of 1 million pills were caught last year, that means they caught 100,000. Yeah. But if this year 10 million pills got through and they got 10%, that means 90% got through. So even though the busts are bigger, so is the, you know, the load factor, so is the product factor coming in. So people, you know, don't anybody sit on your laurels. And I think you're right. Grassroots is the way. But I got to tell you, I don't know the best way to do this. And oh my God, I can't tell you the amount of meetings I go to on a regular basis and the groups I sit with and the conversations that are going on. But we're not making progress, unfortunately. And, you know, people go, well, how do you know? I said, look at the data. Yeah. Don't even listen to anything I just said to you. Go on and just Google it. Look at the CDC. They've got updated data that is 2 years old. Updated data that's 2 years old. How's that for an oxymoron?
Yeah. And I'm going to beat up on politicians a little bit here. When people stand proudly and say they have the answer for homelessness, they do not. And where's the accountability when their plan doesn't work? Like, whoa, we just need more money. We need more money because the provisioning wasn't enough. And it's like, no, come on, you guys got to stop. You're not doing the right thing. How do we empower you? How do we get you? Like, you need a bigger megaphone. If I'm a governor and I'm like, hey, man, help advise us. Here's what I know. So my buddy Phil has ALS. I use him as a lot as an example. And the drug companies, all of the nonprofits, they're all desperate to solve this problem. And so they bring Phil in to help them understand it. And they will go through these whole long meetings, and then they'll turn to Phil to get like a reality check. And he's like, no, you guys are so far off base. You're not thinking about this like someone that has ALS. Like, one of the things that the government wants to do, and God bless them, they're trying to do the right thing, but they want to protect Phil from himself. And he's like, let me experiment on myself. I'm already dying, you know? So let's not worry about my long-term well-being. Let me use the time I have left to try to see if we can figure something out, you know? And so you have these big problems, and you have the people like you that are on the ground that can bring in light into this, like, stop going in this direction. Can you just correct this way and we'll see how this goes? But we can't even get you an audience, you know, with the person who claims I'm on it. I'm going to beat addiction. I'm going to get people off the street. And you're like, well, let me help.
Yeah, it is a interesting dilemma that frustrates me every day, and I know that I can be of help. You know, someone from the White House should be calling me every week going, here's what we've got. Are we headed in the right direction? What's the smell test look like? Is this something that you think communities might absorb? I mean, I had a high-ranking person in my community, I can't really disclose who it was because it's embarrassing, asked me if I thought the education prevention piece that's going on is working in our community. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Wasn't the increase in overdose deaths last year up 600% from the year before? He said, well, yeah. I said, then you don't need me to answer your question. You've got the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't get personal for me. I mean, look at the science. One of my better friends, I metaphorically say, is the medical examiner, because that's where real data comes from. No one else, because they're taking tests and they've got the information and they know what the percentage of fentanyl is in the body against methamphetamine, marijuana, or cocaine, or heroin. But whatever the higher percentage is generally what they check as the cause of death. Yeah. And I just heard recently that for everybody who overdoses on opioids, there are 14 people that are now having overdose reversals, mostly from naloxone, which is the only real reversing drug. Well, that information is not really made public, which says, hey, we have a product out there that works.
Right.
Well, why isn't it in everybody's hands?
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things that I can say in a room that, a politician may go, well, that's going to take money. I go, what's it costing now
yeah, exactly.
to deal with somebody who overdoses 3 times a week, who's on no income, who's homeless, for example? And, that, and by the way, the housing, I love it. And because in LA and Skid Row, they talk about they're going to fix homeless by building these $700,000 studio apartments. Well, there's only 40,000 plus homeless people. I can't even calculate that because I don't even know what that turns out to. Is that like a trillion 0.28? I don't even know. So many zeros. And when I listen to people talk about it, I won't get called about it because they know better.
Yeah.
They know that they know what I'm going to say, and they know what I'm going to say is going to cause them to stop doing what they're doing. Because if you do what you've done, you're going to get what you've gotten. And there's not one when I heard 3 years ago, half the homeless in the country are in California, I thought, well, that shouldn't be a surprise for anybody. Yeah. I mean, if you're a social worker anywhere else and you heard that, San Diego just opened up a new tent. You send half your caseload there because it's 12 degrees out. Yeah. Send them to San Diego.
Well, and California is glad to absorb the hit on finances and everything else, and I don't know how many caseworkers are like, hey, I successfully got a person off of heroin and they're now a viable member and they've got a job in the union. Like that. I mean, most of the time they're like, I lost another one. I mean, that's going to happen more than anything else. And so you're right when we have these things. And I don't know what it is. And this is a little bit of a political statement here, but the left always says, let's put all these desperate people in one building. Whether it's old folks during COVID, like jam them all in the same building with this infectious disease. You take all these people that need something and they're going to jam them into these buildings where they don't have enough stuff. And so they're going to be horrible to one another. They're going to steal everything because they don't have enough things. And so just because you build a house doesn't mean they're not homeless. Anyhow.
Well, and without life skills, you take somebody who's used to living on the street. I mean, at one point I had 175 beds on 9 scattered properties. So we really learned, if you don't give somebody the basic life skills, and the basic things they need to live on, which equalizes that worry about someone's got something I don't. Right. They're not treated like human beings. The reason to create systemic change for them is not going to stay. And you're right. It's like going into treatment today. It's like going into jail. I don't mean to poo-poo the treatment industry, but people go in with marijuana addiction, come out hooked on heroin. How does that happen? So, they're and I worked with people coming out of jail and prison, so I understand institutionalization experientially and anecdotally, and people learn to survive. And once they've got those tips and tricks, they don't give them up until they get replaced. And if they're feeling entitled and they want you to replace them before they give them up, and that's the attitude they've got, most social workers aren't going to want to work with people who have that chip on their shoulder because they don't even know how to ask for help, and they're being told that they really need, to get a job. Well, I haven't worked in 7 years. I don't have a resume. I have a criminal. I don't even have an ID because they won't give me one when I leave prison or jail. So,
yeah. So, okay, whole lot of bitching, whole lot of problem, illustrating. What do we do if it is going to be grassroots? And besides getting you a megaphone and a bigger megaphone and a bigger reverb megaphone, what do we do, man?
Well, to create systemic change, there's going to have to be a process. There's going to have to be a continuum. It can't be a one-off. And it can't be something that's done in this administration that doesn't go on to the next one. It's got to be something that we set up and we put tools in. And my opinion is, from what I've learned, is the younger we can get the audience to get the information, the best chance we have for systemic change long term. So I really want to empower the schools, and I don't want to take another piece of paper and put it on the existing teacher to say, pass this out. We need to get skill sets. We need to get trained individuals. We need to get people in schools to support the teachers, because they generally have the kids for more waking hours than the parents do if they're working. So we start with the tools. We start with the education there. I like to call it, everybody likes a piece of pie: prevention, information, and education. Or prevention, informing, and education. We need to start at a much younger age. And I say younger age, I'm talking probably 3 or 4. Wow. And then put back in the resources that the schools need. I mean, don't tell a teacher they need to add this to their curriculum. Give them a body or two, or interns, or bring in retired people, somebody who wants to get trained, who wants to help, and can do the information sharing, so we can share the load that schools have once we get everybody back again and in school. Secondly, I think we need leaders who are willing to say what we're doing is not working and look at best practices. I mean, there are best practices everywhere. You just have to look at them, and you have to be willing to bring them in, and you have to stop trying to do it yourself. And the third thing is, we have to stop politicizing how we help people. I don't think that works. That just doesn't work, in my opinion.
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, we need a variety of solutions. Forget, at the big level, right? Knowing that we're going to lose some people through the cracks, and that's where the grassroots folks hopefully come in and plug those holes. But even something as simple, I know, like we always like to say, we always like to mock the just say no thing, or abstinence when it comes to sex. But if you can inspire a percentage of that population to just simply abstain for longer than they might have otherwise done it, because it's part of the package, you've grabbed some of them. Is that fair to say, that we don't focus at all on abstinence anymore because we kind of mock it?
I think the message of no is not a good one. For example, I wrote a book back in 2011. It's called Tell Me No, I Dare You. Mm-hmm. And it's all about going from no to yes. I think we have to empower people, inform in a simple way where they can start thinking with their own mind, body, and soul, because they've gotten some basic tools, what they should be doing, what's right for them, and what's healthful and healthful. And then start to have a more informed conversation, rather than to say, I'm going to do this because I voted this way, or I'm going to think that way because that's what my hierarchy tells me to do. One of the things that, there's a buddy of mine, he's a psychiatrist, was one of those, United Nations drug czars, traveled the world to take a look at all the different modalities that are going on in different parts of the world, treatment-wise. And forgive me, they're picking up the trash, and I'm still in my shed here, but my wife put me a couple of years ago to isolate me. The theory that has come up from his experience and others is, by simply being at dinner as a family 3 times a week, you can change the way people think. You can change the way people love. You can change the way people feel. You can help influence the positive part of life, and also be present to hear from your children, so you can help steward what their next steps look like as well. I mean, I know that sounds a little simple, but at the end of the day, when you think about it, I grew up like that. I didn't like it because I was the black sheep. So when we went around the table, I was the guy that, kicked the teacher, got kicked out of school, or got another F. But I think that's important. And if it isn't something literally like that, something like that, if you will, where you set your phones down, you take a few minutes, and you as a person practice self-care, breathe, meditate, take a moment, listen to music, find your favorite podcast, just the sound of rain falling, whatever it takes. Talk to your dogs, your cats, your fish, your animals. Do something out of what you're normally do. Write, journal, do something, go to your faith-based leaders, find a way to volunteer in the community again, do that, and know that there's always hope and help.
No, that's a great point. And I think about a lot of my family's Mormon, and, they have these values where they get together and they spend time together. And I'm not saying Mormons are perfect, but when you look around at how they stay married, how their families are, there's a lot of success in that model. And that's the same thing in a lot of other faith-based organizations. And whether you're doing that or you're doing something else, that community, that allowing the parents to, in a softer way, case manage their own kids. It's like, let's deal with this problem together, right? Tell me about your podcast.
Well, it's called Happy Hour. We record it every week. Small little audience, a little boutique thing, and I try to bring guests on that, have an interest in obviously the passion for what they do, and a lot of it's around mental health issues and accessing treatment and different forms of it. And I bring people on that families who've had experience with loss of loved ones, and people who have survived and gone through the trauma of that kind of experience. And we're putting a lot of veterans in front of us to come on the show. It's called Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. So, and I'd love to have you come on, Pete, and talk about you.
Yeah, done. We'll definitely do that. That's a no-brainer, and that's easy. And I was hoping that I could get down to San Diego, but I've got to do some VA battling, and that takes precedence over me getting in my truck. But I definitely want to come down and check out your guys' shop and help in any way that I can, because
love to have you.
We can do for each other. Anything in closing before I wrap this up?
If no one's told you they love you today, I love you.
Stand by. Let me wrap this up.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.